So that was a really long module, a long course section, because control structures are such a key feature in any programming language, and therefore, of course, also in JavaScript. You learned a lot about if and else if, about these logical operators, equal, triple equal, smaller than, smaller or equal, greater than, and so on. You learned how to combine conditions with and also with or, of course, which we had here, for example. You also learned about the special behaviors of and or, which you can use to assign default values or to assign certain values if some other condition is true. You learned about booleans, true and false, and also about falsy and truthy values, and that JavaScript, if no logical operator is given, tries to coerce a value that is not a boolean to a boolean value. And you learned about some of the rules, like 0 being treated as false, any other number, including negative numbers, being treated as true, and so on. That's also important, of course. You learned about the ternary expression, which allows you to write inline if statements, so to say, which you can't do with normal if statements. But if you just need a value and you have a relatively short condition and a relatively short code to get that value, then this can be an alternative to writing a more verbose if statement where you assign values to variables. And you also learned a lot about loops, about the different loops that exist in JavaScript, how they generally work, how you work with them, how you configure them. And there, of course, you also should play around with these to get a feeling for how they behave, how you can configure them, and how you can use them. And it's needless to say that throughout this course, we will heavily work with if and with loops, of course. These are core constructs of any programming language and therefore also of JavaScript. We also had a look at error handling in this module, another crucial concept which will be important in more complex programs you're going to write, which will also be important later down in the course, and which also is a control structure because it allows you to control code that might fail and then act upon an error and do some fallback logic, show an error message to the user, things like that. And besides this little project we worked on, where I can only encourage you to dive into the code, tweak certain things, and fully understand how it works and what we did there, besides that, I do encourage you to play around with these things on your own. Also, of course, use the resources you find in this module, like the attached slides. And if this is very much right now, which it certainly is, don't feel overwhelmed. These are core constructs and therefore we will use them throughout the entire rest of the course. So if you're not entirely sure yet when you would use which loop, you will get a lot of practice just by continuing with the course, of course. Because we will use loops there, we will use if statements there, we will use many logical operators there, and therefore all these concepts here will come to life over and over again throughout this course.